Red.
Okay. Hi, everyone. J.R. Foresteros here, and I am so excited to do this little interview with two of Dallas's artists. This is Ilknur Ozgur and Michael Cleveland, who are Artstillery. And they have a new, I don't know what to call this, a new experience, a new play, a new something that you probably haven't ever experienced before, called the Generations of Adam, that is playing in Dallas right now. So first of all, thank you all for taking a few minutes to talk with me.
Yay. Thanks for having us.
First, tell me a little bit about what is Artstillery, just in broadly, before we get into Generations of Adam.
Michael, do you want to start or do you want me to start?
What is Artstillery?
We can tell you.
I'll start.
Okay.
So basically, she and I both bopped around Dallas as performance artists for several years, working in a lot of what you'd call kind of non-traditional theater, not immersive theater, experimental theater, both definitely kind of tired of the traditional scene. Not that the traditional scene is bad per se, but we were just very interested in questions about how you could push boundaries, the nature of the relationship between performer and observer, and what those things mean when you, instead of just giving your audience a passive viewership experience, but instead bringing your audience into a partnership with you in performance. And so she called me up one day and was like, hey, you want to make some cool stuff? I was like, yeah, I want to make some cool stuff. And we got a couple other people together and we started talking, and slowly over time, the original incarnation of Artstillery was born. That was about 3 years ago, and it's kind of shaped and molded and evolved to what it is now. But I guess if you had to put a label on what it is an experimental performance company and an arts advocacy group, because we kind of try to do both of those things at the same time. That's my short answer.
It's interesting. Go ahead.
No, that was a really good start. What were you going to say, JR?
I was just thinking about how it's sort of just becoming mainstream with things like Deadpool to break the fourth wall in more mainstream art. And it sounds like what y'all are doing is pushing way beyond just breaking the fourth wall, which again, I know has been something in theater for a while, but
yeah.
I love that. So where did the idea for Generations of Adam come from?
It's been a journey for us to get to Generations of Adam. That is why Artstillery started. A lot of us, this is just in general, like our voices are not heard in all pieces that are created. And we wanted to create work that in today's society, spoke to social, political, cultural matters that were happening around us from our perspectives, from real people's perspectives, and not just one writer's perspective. And so I think that's why Artstillery is so special too, because it's created almost democratically. There are many voices that are part of creating the process. There are many voices that are part of all the tweaks, and throughout until we open, until even after we open, we're still hearing new voices, and then we add those voices to our performances. The show is always evolving and always changing, and we feel quite guerrilla in that sense. There's a difference between a show that you go to that you just walk through and a show that's really immersive. And we are very immersed in our community, but also in terms of how people view performances and they come and they experience them. And then what we really hope for is that they see their own narratives through the words of the community members around them. So when that started happening with us, it started with this production called Family Dollar that we were just workshopping. And it was another amazing experience that we could talk about later. But we noticed that people were finding healing through the work we were doing. And then that went into our piece at the Nasher Sculpture Museum, where we did a call to prayer inside the Nasher during the immigration bans. And that was a whole beautiful experience for us as well. And then that led into Dirty Turk, which was about immigration and migrants and Syrians, actual stories. And so we called that an identity trilogy. And so who are we? What are we facing? And naturally, Michael had this beautiful idea for, a script. And anytime that we get an idea for a script, it comes mindfully from what is brewing around us. And so Generations of Adam was this brainchild of Michael's. And we took it and we looked at it. And as we do with every single script, we tear it apart and we tear it apart and we tear it apart and tear it apart. And we go and we research and we talk to community members, and we teamed up with therapists on this project. And we even had a healing event with therapists. We did 4-hour sessions on Saturdays with community called Mindfully, with a company called Mindfully Embodied, that our movement therapist that is with Artstillery, her name is Conchetta Trotsky, she aided on this. And then we joined up with the Ross Institute of Trauma. So it's just this whole experience meshed together to create Generations of Adam.
It kind of always starts with a or like a base script. So like for Dirty Turk, Ilknur and I and several other people had done a stage reading of this play that she created, many, many years ago. We did a stage reading of it in 2011, I think. And then when Artstillery started, we were looking for our first experience. We're like, well, why don't we come back to Dirty Turk? And that was like 150 pages worth of material. And we took that as a base kernel of an idea, shredded it, and then researched and put it back together as an immersive experience. Same thing for Generations. I wrote a stage play several years ago just about my own journey. And so we took that play and looked at it, found out what the essential kernels of it were, ripped it to pieces, got community narrative around it, and then rebuilt it from the ground up into what the Generations of Adam ends up becoming. So these plays are never standalone plays. They, from the very beginning, once our team comes around it, it becomes a living, breathing community partnership. That never stops evolving, it never stops growing, it never stops breathing, even after the production is done, because those relationships don't stop. And so we kind of look at a work like Generations as I don't even, it's hard to even put words around it, like a breathing.
It's a breathing document.
It's a breathing document that lives in between the people who are involved in it. And by the people who are involved in it, I don't just mean Artstillery, I mean the entire community that's around it, including the audience members who come to see it, some of whom are people who shared their stories with us.
Wow.
And so it's a way for them to experience a healing and a regeneration and a restoration within their own story, which is why we call it the Identity Trilogy, because all three of the pieces that we've done are memory plays, they're memory performances about people and their identities within their stories.
So for this particular one, for Generations, what are the kernels that you felt were the maybe the touchstones or the just like what are those pieces or what are those core ideas that became Generations of Adam?
Well, for me, it all was based around some stuff from my own life story, some of the original kernels. You'll see when you come and see the play, it exists in multiple storylines, but one of the storylines is about a family with that's dealing with some like pornography addiction and stuff like that, and how the adverse effects that had on the child in the family as he grew up, and then repeated those patterns later. And so in my own version of the play originally, that was the kernel. We were like, hey, this is the stuff. And the abuse that the wife experienced, the gaslighting, and just all of those things that were kind of inside that family. That was the original nugget that we took. And that was 130 pages on its own. And we took probably 25 to 30 pages from that and started with the rebuilding of it. And so that was the original kernel, but then it grew from there to encompass other stories, other families, all kinds of traumas and abuse. And honestly, it it ended up being a lot of spiritual abuse, but that was not where we intentionally started out. We kind of had to let the process evolve and go where it wanted to, like a flowing river, let it kind of just weave and get where it needed to go. And we ended up getting so many stories about church trauma and about abuse and spiritual trauma in various forms, that's kind of just how it evolved and what it evolved into,
Do you think that was because of the particular communities that you're a part of, or just, it's not like we have any shortage of church abuse,
Sure.
even in the news, right? Like that's the stuff that has come to light, let alone all the stuff that hasn't.
Well, the premise of the show is not about church abuse,
Yeah.
right? The premise of the show is about institutional abuse and the patriarchy that exists within institutions, and those types of themes were what were being screamed at us, and this idea of it doesn't, and so many people said this to us in their interviews. I'm not attacking the institution that I was a part of. I'm going after the fact that there are broken people in every institution. Just because you're a part of, a particular institution, it doesn't mean that you're not a broken person.
Mm-hmm.
And then so we started looking at this idea, and you'll hear it repeated in the performance about people saying, "Oh, I'm a good person." Yes, I know, but you're broken. And then it's this idea of cycling that trauma and abuse that they had suffered through when they were children. So there are powerful characters in this show that represent institutions that have done bad things to other people. But then what we do is we're very mindful, and we look at, through interviewing people, we find out that they themselves were abused. And so they're taking that inner child that was hurt and abused, and that's in their frame of reference for every way that they behave. So those people go into different institutions and different places to be and function and be leaders, but that inner child of trauma and abuse is still in front of them. And that's why that they repeat a cycle. And so that happens to other human beings in front of them. And those human beings, what's their trauma that they had then that's compacted with the new stuff. So that's really what this is about. Is it doesn't matter where you are, but just the systems that are set up. I mean, institutions and the way they're set up is the perfect breeding ground for trauma and abuse to occur.
I love that the title of the play is Generations of Adam, because that's such a, that's so much what those early chapters of Genesis are about, is how that trauma gets passed down generation to generation to generation. And, when I first saw that was what it was called, I was like, I wonder why they're pulling Genesis 5:1 out here. And then even as I was just reading the description, I don't know, like for me, I think that was like a very particular insight for me just because of where I live and breathe. But Michael, was that your original title for your play?
It was. I grew up in the Southern Baptist Church in a small town in the South, in Georgia, and saw a lot of that, experienced a lot of that myself. And so when we were creative, when I was in the original incarnation 3 years ago, honestly, the title created itself because so much of it was about that, about generational cycles. I was like, it's just, it talks about sins of the father, sins of the son, the ideas of the blessings and the curses passed from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob, all the way down through the patriarchy of the early Israelite people, the tribes, and so for me it was a perfect metaphor for the way that we still exist and those power structures that exist. That's such a good way to put it. What she said is that, and at no point were we ever intending to, go after the church or anything like that. It's not about that. It's about the superstructure. It's about the institution of the superstructure, and it could be anything. It doesn't have to be the church. It could be a business. It could be a family. It could be anything that creates that structure where those things happen. So in a lot of ways, I think the entire world, no matter where you are, what you are experiencing, you are living in the generations of Adam cycle.
Great.
We all do that in our own way.
Well, and Ilknur, I think to your point, right, like the wrapping it all up and putting it under the banner of patriarchy, I think is particularly helpful to look at how there are particular patterns that we can really identify, Michael, to your point, like across generations. Ilknur, what were what drew you specifically to this project? Was it just that it was something that Michael did and you had a good relationship with him, or why, because you're the director, is that correct?
The mind mapper, the director.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, if you're sort of taking such a lead on this project, like what was it that really told you, yeah, like this project right now, like for you personally?
Each project has felt like this is a project right now that needs to happen, right? So that speaks to us that we're doing the right thing. When we looked at generations of Adam, not only myself, but how do I put this? There is this world that we're in today, and I don't want to say this generically. I really want to make a point that our world has been suffering for eons. People have been suffering, I mean, like since we were here. And my biggest concern when we were creating this was, and I had talked to Conchetta about this. I said, I have been, and I am currently being in this state where I am super mindful of the fact that everyone around me has had trauma, whether they are able to speak to it or not. Even when you are having a conversation with someone that you hardly know, it's right there in front of them. Like sometimes with all this work that we've done, I'll walk away from a conversation and say, wow, I was actually speaking to their inner child and not them as an adult. And so you start to, and she goes, as a therapist, she's like, yeah, did you see that? Did you feel that? And she's like, I'm so happy you saw that today, And so I had to look at myself and say, oh, when is it my inner child trying to forgive something or heal something or try to correct something that happened in my past through this current relationship I have, whether it's with, somebody that I intimately care for, or a friendship, just anything. So, the big question I had while we were putting this together was, how do I effectively and mindfully and with care relate to everyone's trauma? There's so many different forms of trauma out there. I don't want to generically blanket this, but I have about an hour and 40 something minutes maybe to cover it. So that was probably one of the strongest conversations I had during this, was when Conchetta mirrored back to me. She said, Ilknur, it doesn't matter, but I don't want to say this wrong. She said, every single human being carries trauma in their body the same way. And everyone needs to heal it in similar ways. We all need to heal that trauma, and there's a process that we all need to go through. And that just went, I get it.
I think that was like one of the big freeing moments for us. Yeah.
It was. Yeah.
Like I remember early on when we were talking about this and it was starting to bubble and grow, we were very overwhelmed. We were like, we've got 90 minutes. This topic is so enormous. There was a real feeling of fear about how do we package it. And then having done some research and reading that and talking to Conchetta, being like, hey, it doesn't matter how you package this. It's the same for everybody. Like everyone experiences this the same way in the same kind of fractalized physical body. And the experience is the same no matter what the trauma. There was a lot of freedom in that for us to say, okay, now we can package this in a way that can be experienced by everyone, not just talking about this one little small area of trauma, because it's such an enormous topic.
So I have not experienced, I guess is a better word, Generations of Adam yet. I'm the guy that when I go to improv comedy, I sit right in the front and I'm like wanting, right? But my wife and some of our friends who are coming on Saturday or on Friday when we come to see this, are very nervous because they're the exact opposite. Like they want to sit in the very back, or if possible, watch from another room. So there's like no possibility. And so the word experiential like has freaked them out. So like, what would you, I mean, I don't get it. I understand it, but I don't get it. Cause I'm just
Do
like,
you understand it?
yeah. So like what would you say to those kind of folks? Like if you have that kind of anxiety, should you just not come to this, or are they misunderstanding what this is? Because again, I think a lot of folks don't really know what experiential theater is.
Yeah, well, for one thing, I would say, like as far as like sitting in the front or the back, there are no seats. So if you want to sit down, you have to sit down in the scenes with the actors. And that's a part of what makes it experiential. Audience members are free to explore the spaces. They're all activated all at the same time. And so you are welcome as an actor if, you know, as an observer, if, you know, if Ilknur and I are doing a scene together in an immersive experience and we're sitting at a table, you have the ability to come and sit at that table with us while we talk.
Do I have to?
No, not at all. You can,
So
stand in the corner the whole time if you want. But it's, yeah, these things are meant to be done and experienced around you and not passively observed from a distance. So that's what I would say.
And if they want to, they can, right? So if there are, as the world is happening, you can choose to go sit somewhere that is far away from the main action as you want. And some people do that. Some people sit on the floor in an area that they haven't seen activated in a while. Like the show teaches you where to go. That's what's really interesting about this kind of work. If you're doing true immersive work, I mean, I really do believe this. You find a way to guide your audience, to teach them, when you hear this sound, this is going to happen. This lighting cue is this, because you go through the piece, you learn something. And that's what was interesting about Dirty Turk. We intentionally were trying to teach the audience Turkish by command cues. Like they would hear a word, not know it was the first time, but they knew, they would tell us, the second time I heard that word, even though I don't know Turkish, I knew that if I moved to this location, I would be out of the action. So that's part of the experience too. So this audience learns, hey, I know this action's happening here, that sound cue went off. If I go sit in the church in a pew, I'm safe. Like I'm removed in a sense. But then when I hear this sound cue, I better get out of there and go to this corner. It's really interesting. Like, and you are not part of, like, how do I put this? You're safe as an audience member. You're always safe. We always care about you and where you are. We're always super aware where you are. We're not like, hey, JR, come shake my hand. Like, that's never happening. But we as performers know where you are. We can feel what you're giving us too. Like, we have been so immersed in this process for so long ourselves, like some of us 9 months, some of us 7, some of us 5. But we've done this kind of work for so long, at least Michael and I have, that we can help. And there's other performers in the show that can help too. Where if we know that you're anxious and we feel that energy from you, we'll take care of you too. We're not going to like drag you into something ever. We never touch you. And what's also mindful for these
Intentionally layer the action so that if there's one thing that's happening. Hello?
Oh, you froze up a little.
Sorry, I cut out for a second, I think. Sorry, I was just going to say, like, we intentionally layer the action. So if there's something happening that is too intense for an audience member, they can watch another narrative. They can explore multiple things at one time.
They kind of like check out of the scene and go.
Yeah, if they need to take a break, we create it in such a way that, oh, there's a puppet character in a tent playing with a dollhouse. If I need to take a break from what's happening over here, I can go sit down with him and watch him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that you kind of have choice in how you take in the narrative. You have choice how you take in the experience. And there is a safety, to her point, a safety that you're not going to be just thrust from thing to thing to thing for 90 minutes. That you have some control over the way that you take it in.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's all. I don't want to keep you all any longer. And again, I'm going to go experience this on Friday, October 18th. So I am super excited about it. I'll probably have lots more thoughts after I get to experience it. But I am so glad that I found out about Artstillery and about Generations of Adam. How long is the show running?
Till November 16th. And that last week of November 16th, we are going to do a special Monday and Wednesday night show as well for people who can't come on Friday and Saturday nights.
Perfect.
And, we welcome, like, we're hitting a show on Veterans Day, November 11th. So we also are very community activated. And so if there are people that just cannot financially cover the cost of coming, we have a ticket donation program. So the Oak Cliff Cultural Center has donated 40 tickets. Attendees who come to the show donate tickets. So if you show up and, you can respectively, quietly even tell the person working in the front door, I'd like a donation ticket, please. They'll just pull it off the board and give it to you. It's just like, it's a community effort because we want everyone to be able to see it. So even on Veterans Day, if you know any veterans and you think that this would be a healing experience for them, tell them to come. Just tell them to come.
Awesome.
Little things like that.
Yeah.
Well, again, the show is Generations of Adam. I'm going to populate the comments under this video and audio with all of the links to find tickets. There is a Facebook event that you can go to and find all the information there as well. Thank you again, both, for taking some time to share about this really, really cool project.
We really appreciate you asking us.
All right, folks, let me know if you're going to come with me on Friday or any other time to catch this. And yeah, make sure you get a chance to check it out before it's gone. And yeah, let us know what you think, especially. Really looking forward to seeing how this impacts everyone. So thanks again, guys. I'll see you Friday.
See you Friday.
Friday.